So, good afternoon, Frank.
Good afternoon, Brian. Thank you very much.
The last time we talked, we were talking about insurance and the outlook for the future generally, and how in the modern world, um, uh, taking care of the future or what might happen to us in the short, medium, and long term has become a very different prospect. And even as we talk, it seems as though the rate of change is increasing and new possibilities of qualitative change are opening up. There's a lot of things happened in the past week in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in the negotiations with Iran. I'm not sure how long ago now the incident with Bo Xilai was in China, and then roughly the same time, but maybe more than a week ago now, the a revolt of the Tuareg in the Central Sahara. And I was talking about this with friends over lunch, and it occurred to me that the case of the Tuareg in the Central Sahara is rather like the Kurds in the Middle East. It's as though the Tuareg are the African Kurds. That is, because of the way the continent got divided up by the colonial powers and then left as independent nation states, or as states to try to develop themselves into nations at the end of the colonial period in the middle of the last century. The Tuareg found themselves in half a dozen different countries, in 4 different countries in particular, in most especially. And we haven't heard anything from them since then, because their level of awareness of what was going on in the rest of the world, or even probably their own countries that they've been incorporated into, had not developed to the point where they were concerned about it. But now it's getting to that point. Mm-hmm. And the reason that it's become a crisis now is that Gaddafi in Libya had been employing a lot of them as mercenaries. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that one of the things that happened quite frequently in several parts of the world in the colonial period and before was that mobile populations got hired as mercenaries. It happened to the Baluch, who I worked with in southeastern Iran, who found themselves distributed all over the Persian Gulf and Central Asia, getting employment as mercenaries. And more recently, the Tuareg had the similar opportunity in the Middle East, and Gaddafi in particular made use of them. And then, of course, when Gaddafi lost out as a result of his version, the Libyan version of the Arab Spring, they lost their jobs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But by that time, they'd learned all sorts of things that they didn't know before. And now they're back in Mali, and we don't yet know what they may be doing in other countries. And they conducted a coup in Mali. Mm-hmm. Now, it looks as though the Malian situation may be under control and may return to something like legitimate rule. At least current commentators are fairly hopeful about it. But I think that this is the beginning of a larger problem of ethnic communities that have been divided up among different states because of the way the retreating colonial powers divided up their territories into modern states.
Well, I think you're correct, and I think if you look, for example, at Nigeria, which has at least 3 distinct ethnic groups located within that one country, which by the way has 300 million people in an area the size of Nevada and Arizona. I mean, go figure that out for population density for a second. And probably 20% of them are Muslims.
And one of the fastest growing populations in Africa and anywhere.
Indeed. Well, I'm interested a little bit about the events in Mali, because that's part of the Francophone world. And the French have been very, very careful in making sure that things don't stray too far. Earlier this week, or actually it was the end of last week, there was a military coup in Guinea-Bissau, a little bit north of Mali. And the French were all over it. The French Foreign Ministry were issuing statements saying that we expect a legitimate rule of law to be carried out. And the coup, I believe, as in Mali, ceased and desisted, because the French are known to intervene because of economic interests, and the French Foreign Legion is still pretty much on site throughout that area.
Yes, so I think that at the moment things don't look too bad, but I think that it was a crisis when it first happened, and that it is the beginning of a new phase of political development in certain parts of the world like this, where the small minority populations that were created as minority populations only as a result of the drawing of new state boundaries very recently are now reaching a level of awareness of what's going on in the rest of the world, where they are beginning to think that they need to be all together and to have more say in what's going on as it relates to their day-to-day affairs.
And that's certainly very proper.
So I think that this is one of the new things that we're going to have to deal with if we get bored with dealing with the financial problems.
Well, speaking of the financial problems, I've noticed in our discussions over the past months that there are two strands here with globalization. There's obviously the very real and more noticeable social strand, which I like to think in many ways actually was the catalyst for the Arab Spring. But there's also the economic strand. And also last week in Oslo, Norway, the executive director of Lloyd's, Dr. Richard Ward, announced that because of increased trafficking in the Arctic as a result of melting of ice and opening of shipping passages, there now are going to be increased opportunities for energy drilling. And specifically said, the quote is rather interesting, we estimate that there may be $100 billion in profits that could be made by insurance companies with the opening of the Arctic. And by that he means new opportunities for product coverage to be able to insure against oil spill and clean up environmental remediation in areas that previously had been untouched. So it's almost as if the economic side of the change that we're talking about has already been spotted by some and has been exploited as a bit of a profit-making opportunity.
Interesting that this should happen on the centenary of the Titanic disaster.
Indeed.
I just hope they're careful with their with navigation up there.
Indeed.
But I agree with you that although maybe I'm putting it in slightly different words, that the financial dimension is complementary to the social dimension. That is, new financial opportunities arise because new sorts of people, new categories of people in new places are interacting with each other, which creates new opportunities. And the new opportunities might begin as financial and become social, and not begin as social and become financial. But the financial opportunities are really only an abstract symbolization of what's being done on the business level of day-to-day interaction among actual people.
Agreed.
It involves a larger and larger arena all the time, and of course the Arctic opens up an enormous arena, which may, for that reason, have a really big impact on the total process of globalization. Because what else is there geographically in the world that could be opened up to greater interaction on the scale of the Arctic Ocean?
The only other place I can think is directly opposite,
But,
which we've
but
now found out has even more emperor penguins than they thought they had.
but then you've got to go, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's going to be good for the penguins, but I don't think it's
Yes.
going to make much difference to us for a while
No.
because
No. Too
in
cold.
shipping, you've got to go around the
Right. Right.
outside of it all the time. And I suppose one can imagine that in time there'll be resorts down there, but
Let's hope not.
uh, not in the immediate future. Anyway, anything that opens up the possibility of increased interaction increases the rate of change, and of course the what is unknown is to what extent it's going to differentiate amongst winners and losers.
Well, look,
And
could we talk a little bit about a little bit of interaction that
yeah,
occurred in Istanbul on Saturday and the 5+1 talks
yeah,
with the
Friday, wasn't
Friday or Saturday with the
it? Yeah,
Iranians?
yeah.
What do you make of that result? It looks
Well, it's certainly not improved the relationship between Netanyahu and Obama.
that's exactly what I was going to say. Netanyahu was pulling out his remaining hair, saying, "You've just given them a 2-month extension with nothing to do."
I just heard Michelle Obama on NPR being interviewed as a mother and what it's like being a mother in the current situation. And she took the opportunity to compliment her husband on his poise and calm.
Really?
Yes.
Well, let's hope that's what it is, and not
But
willful
anyway,
blindness.
the point is that the talks were run by Catherine Ashton, who certainly ran them in a very different way from any American who might have run them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that everybody had positive things to say about them afterwards. And not even the Americans said negative things about them. And then it was Netanyahu who said, this is a freebie for the Iranians.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, of course, what has happened is that everybody at the talks agrees that they have worked out a way to talk to each other and mapped out the details that they're going to talk about on the 23rd of May.
Mm-hmm.
And Netanyahu says that just gives them an extra month or 5 weeks to continue to do whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it does, but it also gives the other people in the discussions 5 weeks to continue to doing what they're doing, mm-hmm. which is sanctioning the Iranians. So
that's true. The pay quotient will only increase.
So the winning and losing continues on both sides for the foreseeable future for 5 weeks. And on the 23rd, presumably something concrete has to happen, otherwise there'll be another collapse. Mm-hmm. And it's grounds for optimism, I think, that everybody seems to be looking forward to the 23rd rather than some people being in any way disgruntled about it.
Let's take another example of a place that globalization is traditionally viewed as not having spread to, and that would be North Korea. After they launched their missile in that spectacular failure last Friday, as quick as a wink, the commentators began to speculate that in order to save face or regain face, they would soon embark upon a nuclear test. And as recently as yesterday, apparently in Brasilia, of all places, Hillary Clinton announced that the Chinese were joining in a Security Council resolution that would caution North Korea from conducting a nuclear test without extreme results occurring. So that's finally happened. The Chinese have weighed in.
Yes, I hope Hillary's Skype connections are better than ours.
Yes.
The North, I think that not enough people really keep up with what the North Koreans are actually doing and what they've and remember what they've done before when in thinking about what they're doing now. They have nuclear weapons, surely. And so whether or not they make another test or not is not really that significant. Mm-hmm. And the point is, why are they testing a missile and none of the discussions that I've seen actually go into any detail about what the objective of the missile may be, whether it's for launching weapons on to a different range or what it is. But I think more than anything else, it's for internal consumption.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The regime is trying to stabilize itself as much as anything else. And the more that we sound negative about it, the more we help them show that they're important to their own people. If we stop doing that, they would lose this way of justifying their own existence among their own people.
No,
The problem with North Korea is similar to the problem with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
If we start to talk to the Iranians in a what should I say, in a negotiating mode without seeking to put them down all the time, they'll begin to lose their own internal legitimacy.
I agree with you, and I mean certainly that's the case with North Korea. If we stop reacting to them each time they make a move, they're going to have less and less propagandizing opportunities with their population.
Yeah, and I think similar things have to be borne in mind in what's going on in Afghanistan and Pakistan as well, which have also seen crises over the past week with apparently the Haqqani network setting off a number of attacks in Kabul,
mm-hmm.
and the Baluch causing more trouble in Pakistan. So a lot of things are beginning to change qualitatively at an increasing rate, which means that life is getting more and more exciting as globalization progresses.
And perhaps more dangerous. So,
thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. All right.